Hey, everybody, welcome to the Brute Neighbors podcast, the show where we in depth discuss everything that exists. As always, I am Philip, and I am joined by.
Hello, my name is Seth.
His name is Seth. And today we are going to be discussing hometowns.
Woohoo!
This is where I grew up. Nickelback. That's the Nickelback reference of the episode.
A fine musical
That's our
artist.
new weekly feature is Nickelback reference of the week.
Let's see if you guys can spot next week's Nickelback reference.
Gotta keep a close eye out for it. We're also going to be talking about a personal favorite movie of mine, Pan's Labyrinth. Seth watched it for the first time recently, so we'll see what he had to think about it.
I'm very excited to talk about it.
We'll see if he survives the end of the episode if he has the wrong opinion.
We'll see if Philip doesn't explode.
If
his head does not separate.
We'll see if Seth has good taste or not by the end of this episode.
Oh, we already know. We established that in the Taylor Swift episode.
Yeah, that he doesn't have any, yes.
Right.
And our mystery subject of the week is selected by Seth. Seth's going to get 2 in a row this week and next week due to the clusterfuck that was last week's episode. So let's dive right in, shall we? Let's talk about them old hometowns. Where did you grow up, Seth?
Well, I grew up in a tiny little town on the Delaware River called Delaware City, Delaware. We
creative naming conventions.
Oh yeah, no, I don't really know why they called it that. It just sort of stuck.
Well, wasn't it supposed to be like the next big Delaware, like city in Delaware?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I know why they called it that. So Delaware City, for those of you who are not familiar with like mid-Atlantic water routes.
So all of our listeners are very familiar with that, but you know.
So, I mean, back in the day when ships wanted to go from Philadelphia to Baltimore, which were 2 of the biggest cities, they had to go all the way around the peninsula. And so somebody had a bright idea that, we should just cut a canal straight across the peninsula. And they're like, okay, it's going to become a major shipping route. We're going to, and a couple of investors were like, ooh, you know what? We'll put a city right there at where the river and the canal meet. And it's just going to blow up. It's going to be a major trading hub, and we're going to get rich. And so they tried that, and the city grew pretty steadily. And then the boom never came. We stayed about 2,000 people for our entire existence, and here we are today.
All 2,000 people.
All 2,000 people.
So, you are one of those people who basically, for the most part, have lived in the same place your entire life. Like I have born and raised.
Yeah, other than college, I have lived in the same house my entire life.
See, that's crazy to me because like I had a very different experience. So like my, I guess, original hometown was Clarksville, Tennessee, which was it's really only claim to anything is it has a pretty prominent military base there. And yeah, it's about it.
Isn't that where Austin, PA is too?
That sounds familiar. Is that's college, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's over in Clarksville too.
They only matter during basketball season.
I didn't even know they mattered in basketball season. But like I moved around all the time as a kid. Well, really my whole life. And like so like I've lived in Clarksville. I moved to Alabama when I was pretty young. I was in, Huntsville, the Rocket City. They've got rockets, although apparently maybe for not much longer. Apparently the Space and Rocket Center might be closing. Yeah.
But that's like Huntsville's thing.
Yeah. No, they're literally the Rocket City, but no, the Space and Rocket Center is going bankrupt.
Yikes.
I know they've canceled Spacecamp like probably for the rest of time, and they might have to close down the entire Space and Rocket Center.
That is wild. Were you a Spacecamp kid?
I did go to Spacecamp. I
always wanted to, especially after
I loved it.
After I watched the Recess movie, you remember that show Recess?
I remembered existing, but I wasn't allowed to watch it.
Oof. Well, there was a summer vacation movie, and one of the kids went off to space camp, and ever since then I was like, oh man, I want to do that, and little Seth never did.
Oh, I see. Stereotypical little dude child. I was like, I want to be an astronaut, and then so I went to space camp. It was a lot of fun and stuff, but like, unfortunately, for health issues, I would never have qualified to be an astronaut boy. So I could not be space boy.
Very sad.
But yeah, so that's about all Huntsville had going for it, and it might not have that anymore.
So
But like I've floated around Huntsville for the most part. That was like most of my growing up was around the Huntsville area. Like we bounced around, like northern Alabama, but like usually we were centered around Huntsville. So like I would say that was probably the closest thing in my hometown.
Okay. Well, that's something I wanted to ask about was like, was it Huntsville specifically, or was it like just the Huntsville area? But it sounds like it was a couple places in the greater Huntsville.
Yeah. So like there were some years that we were like out in like kind of the suburbs. There were some years we were out, in the boonies. And there were some years that like we were dead center in the city. So like it was just all over the place.
Yeah.
Frequent flyer, just bouncing around. So like, yeah, I mean, Huntsville is fine. I mixed feelings about the city. Like I never want to live there again. But like, it's fine to visit, I guess, every now and then. I'm not close to a lot of people there anymore. Like I didn't keep in touch with most of my old high school friends other than like a handful. And I think most of the most of the people that I liked talking to in Huntsville left Huntsville. So like there's really, other than family, there's not much reason for me to go back to Huntsville.
Yeah. It's weird me trying to think of things in relation to my hometown, because I've got so many like different definitions of my hometown. Because like Delaware City is my hometown. Like that small little town is a little community that I grew up in, and like that's it. But if I'm talking about my hometown, I could very easily be referring to anything in my county, which is a very it's a large amount of space. And so like if I'm talking about like, oh, back home, it could be, I mean, it could literally be anywhere in the greater Philadelphia metropolis that I'm referring to.
Oh wow.
And I mean that's, with hometowns, the context kind of changes depending on who you're talking to. Like when we were at school, there's a ton of people who are like, "Oh, I'm from Atlanta," or "I'm from Chicago," and we're from just the greater metropolitan area. I mean, we still know a ton of people who live in Atlanta and don't actually live in Atlanta.
Well, I mean, I think a big part of that is like usually, I mean, if you're around a big city, you're going to visit big city like a fair bit, even if you're an hour away, like you're probably going to visit a decent bit. If it's like the big city and you're not in like a sizable city. But even outside of that, like when you're like, especially like college and like when you meet a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, it's just a little easier to just say, "Oh, I'm from Huntsville," than to say, "Oh, yes, I'm from Readingville," or some random thing that no one's ever heard of. And like, it's just, if you want to give them a general idea of like the general area and general culture you're from, you're just going to say the most identifiable place, even if it's not exactly 100% true. But like, even then, like the general culture is going to be at least similar enough that like people will know what you're saying, like will know like your general kind of background.
I mean, it's just always been kind of strange for me because, I mean, I live very close to Philly, but I would never say that I'm from Philly. And of course, it's different
Also in a
because I'm
different
from
state.
outside of the state. But
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine who was from right outside of Cincinnati, but because he was in Kentucky, he would just say he was from Kentucky. So, same concept.
Yeah. I think like just everyone has like different associations with like what hometown means to them. And like, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. It's like I've just moved around so much in my life. Like, I guess I would say Huntsville, but like even then, like like, I mean, I still, the family I'm so close to. Some of them are in Clarksville, Tennessee still, and some of them are in Huntsville still.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, like, what is a hometown? Because like when you move around a lot, there is no really. This is the place I grew up. Like I moved to a different house every 2 or 3 years typically.
Yeah. There's also just this sort of phenomenon of like, as I said earlier, your hometown is so reliant on the context in which you're discussing it. Like if if my parents, if anyone ever talks to them now, they'll and like asks where they're from, they'll be like, oh, I'm from New Jersey, or I'm from West Virginia. But if we went on vacation to, say, Florida, and somebody asked us, oh, where are you from, we'd say Delaware. And so the context of what is your hometown changes based on who is asking and where it is being asked.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing too. Is like, I mean, if someone asks me now that I don't live in either Alabama or Tennessee anymore, if someone asks me like where I'm from, like, do they mean where I was born? Do they mean where I spent the
Yeah.
most time of my life? Where I spent the most time of my childhood? Like it
Yeah.
can mean so many different things. Like, and I mean, college was such a big part of my life. Like, do they mean like that, or like do they mean where I last came from, which was Florida? Like where,
Hmm.
there's so many different. I guess when you've lived in as many places as I have, it's like, oh, where are you from? Well, like I was in Florida, but then before that I was in Tuscaloosa, and then I was in Huntsville. It's like, where do you want? What information do you want? You got to be more specific.
It also just matters how much emotion you have staked down in a place too, because I mean, you put out emotional attachments to a lot of different places, but I mean that there is still this like tangible nostalgia anytime that I come back home, that I'm going back to my hometown. That is kind of what constitutes it, is sort of the evocation of a feeling.
I mean, but like again though, like for me, like I have that feeling to varying degrees in so many, because like when I'll visit like my brothers in Clarksville,
Yeah.
like, and like because they still live in the house I lived in when I was like, because we left when I was 6 or 7. They still live in that house.
Yeah.
So like I like I'll go there and I'll be like, oh, like this is where, like, that was my room when I was 4 years old.
Yeah.
And when I do go back to Huntsville, like a few months ago before Corona happened, when I was about to move to Georgia, like I was driving through to meet my mom for dinner, and I like drove through Huntsville, and I was like, oh, there's the Rockets, like, 'cause that was just a familiar sight, and like, and I'd be like, oh, that was one of my old favorite Mexican restaurants and stuff.
Yeah.
And then even like when I visited Tuscaloosa back in January, and like
Yeah.
I'd only been gone from Tuscaloosa for about a year, and like I was like, oh, there's my favorite Mexican place. I have favorite Mexican places everywhere I go. Uh,
Recurring
um,
theme.
recurring theme, because Mexican food is the best kind of food. Fight me. And like I'm not even a football guy, but I would see Bryant Denny Stadium, and I'd be like, hey, there's the stadium, and like just this, that, and the other, like just little things of like, yeah, and it's like there is a fun little nostalgia, but like and I'm sure like when I go back to Disney someday, like I mean, I worked there for 8 months. I'm sure there'll be like a like, because everyone kind of has nostalgia with Disney and stuff. But like
Yeah.
for me, I feel like it'll be a little different because I lived there and worked there for
Yeah. Yeah.
almost a year of my life, and so like I have that kind of attachment to so many very differing places and circumstances. So it's like it's kind of hard for me to place one hometown because like
Yeah.
I've had several
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
way. So like I really I feel like a lot of it just like you said, like it depends on the bonds you have both with things, places, and the people there too. And like I've had those bonds with so many different groups of people and so many different places and circumstances that it's like, like I said, like I've had several different homes.
Hmm.
I'm a nomad.
An air nomad.
Nah, I'm a firebender. I'm either fire
Are
or
there
water. It could
are
go
there
either way.
fire nomads?
I mean, there's the monks. There's
That's true.
the fire sages.
Yeah.
So technically, kinda, maybe.
I think it's very strange that all these different societies make their citizens conform to one style of living.
There is a lot of fascism in the Avatar universe. Like, not just the Fire
Uh,
Nation.
oh no.
There is no war in Ba Sing Se.
There is no war in Ba Sing Se.
Be sure to, if you haven't, go check our Avatar: The Last Airbender episode out from a few weeks back. Quality content.
Good content.
But yeah, so like I don't know, hometowns are just a concept that like I both I do and don't understand. I have a very unique perspective on it, just because I feel like because I haven't just lived in one house like my whole life. Like it's never been my life. So like for me, it's kind of weird thinking about the concept, and I think about people who have lived in like, well, like this the house that I've lived in forever, and it's like that's
Yeah.
just so not
Well,
wacky. It's just so different. It's just a different perspective that I just don't have.
yeah. When I was a kid, I I distinctly remember it was sort of a point of pride, along with like, oh, I've never had a bloody nose, or I've never been stung by a bee. Like I've lived in the same house my entire life, because I was pretty much the only person I knew who that was the case. Almost everyone I knew had moved around at some point, and I definitely is a different kind of experience. I feel like people who have moved around, they don't have that same sort of attachment. They don't have that same sort of sense of permanence. Because like I remember how devastated I was when my family sold my grandmother's house after she passed away, because in my mind I was just like, people have their houses and those houses stay with us forever and ever. And I mean, just like, no, eventually everyone will leave a house, whether because they move or they die. And I mean, that is the natural way of things, and yet I you know cannot fathom the fact that there will be a day in which I'm going to have to sell my childhood home.
Yeah, that's yeah, and like it's definitely because interesting because like even in my own family, like I feel like I have such a different perspective on it because like my brothers still live in that house. They've lived in that house that we lived in when I was 4. They've lived there for God, like I mean over 20 years now. They've lived in that house, and like so
They're
even like
they're what, 10 years older than you, something
yeah
like
like
that.
10 and 12 years.
Okay, gotcha.
Um, so yeah, it's just interesting to think about, you know. And
Yeah,
like I'm sure like my sister is very attached to the house that she currently lives in because she's lived there since I think we moved there my senior year of high school, so she's lived there 5 or 6 years now.
yeah,
Um, but it's just I guess just the circumstances for my particular just how things lined up. It's just like I somehow ended up moving way more than any of my siblings did. Like I mean my sister moved along too, but then she's since then been in a permanent place. Like, but I've just I moved to college and then I moved to Florida, and like I'm just it's just interesting how perspectives can be so different even among people you would assume would have the same background.
yeah. Well, and I mean, to a certain extent, I do also share that sort of part of that sort of mindset of transiency. Not obviously our circumstances have been very different, but I have always had the mindset of like, I'm not gonna stay in Delaware forever. One day I'm gonna uproot and move somewhere else and plant roots somewhere else. Just because that's what both my parents did. They moved from somewhere else. But I have so many friends who like they grew up in Delaware. They went to college in Delaware. They still live and work in Delaware, and they're gonna stay here until they die. And
That's so weird to me.
yeah, it's so strange how, like, there's this dichotomy of people who do that they grow up, live, and spend and work in the same place their entire lives. And like even friends back in Alabama, like I knew people who after graduation went back to their hometowns and like were excited to go back to their little hometowns and just live and work there for the rest of their lives.
That's so
And
weird to me.
whereas for me, I have this mindset of, oh, no, I'm going to find someplace new. And I know a lot of other people of that same mindset. And yet both of those two very different viewpoints feel so natural to the people experiencing them, which I think is very interesting.
It definitely depends on perspective quite a bit. Like, 'cause some people like that comfort of, I've always known this place. I will always know this place. You know, the only changes will be little things here and there, like a new restaurant might open or something.
Yeah.
But like, there's, you know, like there's people like, I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, people I'm friends with in here in Atlanta are, a lot of them have lived here all or most of their lives. And there's like, yeah, like I've been going to this restaurant for, you know, 20 years. And it's just like, that's just such a different perspective. Like I just don't, like I mean, even when I went back and visited Huntsville recently, one of the restaurants that we had always gone to wasn't even open anymore. It was closed. It's like, I mean, we ended up going to like a new Mexican restaurant, which was quite yummy. And of course, there's Mexican restaurant because again, Mexican restaurants are the best. But
I will never understand your fascination with Mexican places.
it's the most delicious food. It is. Oh God, I could eat Mexican food.
Okay, but have you ever tried a burger?
Shut the
I'm a
fuck up. I
pescatarian.
work at a
I've never
fucking
tried a
burger
burger, so
restaurant. I am being triggered. You are triggering me. I literally, I had a hamburger like fucking 2 hours ago.
Oh my God.
Fuck your hamburgers. Don't do that. That's gross.
It's bad for the meat. But
oh Lord. No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna make that joke. Yeah. So yeah, hometowns. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I guess I'm pro the concept of hometowns. I would like to be able to kind of give that stability to my future kids.
Yeah.
Because like I don't like I mean I had an interesting upbringing, but like I don't necessarily regret most of it. Like I think it's cool that I've been to so many places and seen so many things within a certain area. You know, even though I'm only 23 and like I've lived in several different cities and had so many different experiences and met people from all sorts of different backgrounds, and I like that. But I also would like to give my kids kind of the choice, you know, the option of like, yeah, you can just kind of stay here if you want. You'll always have a place to go back to.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, like I guess I'm pro hometowns. Like I'm definitely a nomad wanderer at heart, but you know, I like the idea. There is a nice comfort there, and then in theory that I think is interesting. So yeah, sure, I'm pro hometowns.
I am also pro the concept of hometowns. I think there's something to be said about just how significantly our environments shape who we are. And I mean, I can very easily name a number of different traits about myself that I've gotten solely from the place I grew up. And I don't know, I think that's very interesting that there can be such connections between places and people.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's very it's a weird comfort just knowing like you have a connection to a place.
Yeah.
Like even like, you know, even though like as I said I have several different places.
Yeah.
like in a way that's comforting too. Of like I'll
Oh yeah.
always like I know like there's a bunch of people I know that like if I ever end up in blank city because I'm friends with them, they're like, yeah, you always will have a place to crash if you need. Like you always like if you're ever in like I have friends in fucking Oklahoma that like and just they're like, hey, if you want to crash, I have a couch. And it's like, all right, cool.
No.
You know, it's just like the fact that I have friends from all over the country just due to all the different places I've lived is it's interesting. There's such a connection to like from those places I went,
Hmm.
that connection with those places. I have a connection with those people from those places, and then retroactively or like transitively have a connection to all these other places that I haven't even been to.
Yeah. It's weird for me to think about just the sheer network I have been able to create over my life, the number of different people I have met who now live in all different sorts of places. And I mean, the idea that I can visit almost any different part of the country and be able to meet up with a friend of mine is a very comforting feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, pro hometowns.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna use the bathroom and then we'll talk about his life.
Oh, okay.
I gotta pee. I'm
No,
drinking Coke.
no, you're not allowed.
Well, I'll pee on the podcast. ASMR.
So coming up next, Philip is going to pee live on the hot mic. Not on the mic, obviously. That would
No, that's
be real
not
mean.
sanitary.
All right.
Jesus Christ. All right, so now on to Pan's Labyrinth, which is a personal favorite film of mine. I absolutely love it. I've seen it a billion times. It might be, I think it's almost definitely in my top 5 movies ever made. Seth, you just watched it for the first time, I believe, yesterday.
I
What were your
have.
thoughts?
Yeah. I I
Oh,
I really
spoilers, by the way, for Pan's
yeah.
Labyrinth.
I really enjoyed it. It was a lot different from what I was expecting it to be. I was honestly expecting it to be more like focused more on the fantasy elements and be like more along the lines of Labyrinth or the Dark Crystal or something like that. And it was so much more, it was definitely a lot more of the character drama and very much rooted in a real location in a real historical event and that grounding with such sort of fantastical elements was very very interesting for me.
Yeah.
I was not expecting it to be in Spanish.
Really?
Yeah, well, yeah, I didn't, I knew next to nothing about it, but it was neat because I'm in the process of trying to teach myself Spanish, and so I used it as an opportunity to try and like, let's see if
See
I
if we
can.
can catch up. I fun little note is Del Toro, the director, Guillermo del Toro, he he wrote the subtitles for the movie himself because
Really.
one of his previous movies, The Devil's Backbone, was also in Spanish,
Mm,
and like the subtitle company did it, and he just felt like they butchered the translation. So he
yeah.
was like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna do it myself," and so he did the translation for the subtitles and did all the subtitles himself because he wanted it to be perfect and not take away from the experience of the movie. So I think that's an interesting thing for directors to do that because like the fact of the matter is we've talked about subtitles a little bit on the podcast before, but for people that need subtitles or for foreign films, subtitles are just as important as any other aspect to a film
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's as important as the dialogue itself because a lot of people, whether it be because of disability or if it's a foreign language film, they don't get the story, they don't get the dialogue if without the
Hmm.
subtitles. So like I think
Well,
that's actually a very interesting thing for the director to go in themselves and make them exactly as he wants them to be as part of his vision because that's what people see, that a lot of people, that is their experience is through the subtitles.
well, and I really appreciate that too because I mean something that's very huge within sort of the literary community is with translations of different works of sort of classical works in particular. It's so important to not just give a literal translation, but also do a translation that's, what's the word? Truthful to the to the original source content, its artistry and its sort of
Yeah.
poetic. And I mean that's been a big debate for particularly, but both Homer and biblical translations for centuries is, okay, do we actually, and particularly with the Bible, are we giving a literal translation of what this is saying, or do we want to keep sort of the artistic metaphors intact? And what sort of a balance are you striking there? And I mean, just as you were saying, subtitles are just as important to a movie as any other portion of it. Having the director go in there and put out that effort to craft it himself, you are getting a faithful interpretation of what is being said, a faithful recreation of that original work in a language that you can understand.
For sure. And as someone who does need subtitles for films, even outside of like even English films, I watch the subtitles. I like I appreciate it even more because like a lot of subtitle like companies like don't give a shit. Like if you like there's so many subtitles that are just blatantly not what they are saying, and it's like what's the point of the subtitles if it's not even like this is I'm watching it in English and the words are different. Like the subtitles are different than what is being said in English. So what's the point if they're not even going to be accurate? So like I appreciate that, he was so adamant about people getting the proper experience, the proper story, his vision in every capacity, that he made sure that the English subtitles were done exactly as they were supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that a lot. As for the actual movie itself, I also did not. When I first watched it, I thought it was going to be much more fantasy heavy than it was. Like, of course, the fantasy elements that are there are very blatant and large scale, but yeah, I wasn't expecting to be in some ways a war film. Like, I mean, on a much smaller scale, but I think they weave together very well.
And I this is probably a lot less strange within the sort of Hispanosphere of media, but at least with, I mean, American movies or English speaking movies in general, you do not see a lot of the Francoist regime. You don't see a lot of that period of Spain's history. And it was very significant to the world scale. We don't think about the fact that, like, oh, the fascists controlled Spain for like 60 or 70 years. And I mean, it's interesting to kind of get that sort of recreation of that time period for an American audience, and I know it wasn't for an American audience, but an American audience being able to view it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I mean, that's one thing I love about Del Toro is he's, especially now because he's such a big name, but he's very good about kind of showing different like cultural things to like people who haven't seen these things before, and he's just such a creative director. Like as far as like monster designs, like dude's the modern king of monsters. Like 100%, his monster designs are phenomenal. His monster and creature designs.
You could never tell whether or not the fawn was going to be good or bad. That he was playing a very fine line the entire movie, which I I can appreciate, because I was expecting it to go one way or the other at one point in the movie. And I mean,
up until
the
very end,
very
like you don't,
yeah.
Like, and even at the very end, like the way they kind of flip it on you is like they kind of have that reveal supposedly of like, yes, he actually is going to kill the kid or whatever.
Yeah.
But then like at the ending, when she dies, like then that was supposedly actually the test. And like it was all one big, benevolent test for her to, join the underworld again.
But he's so damn creepy.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, and like his little clicks, his little clicking
Oh
noise.
yeah.
I have a pop vinyl of the Fawn. I know I can't. I know audio podcast, but look up the Fawno pop vinyl. It's nice. It's very detailed for a pop vinyl. But yeah, I absolutely love the Fawn. I love the Pale Man.
Oh my gosh. That that one gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Oh yeah.
I I that I mean, and that's one of the few things from this movie I've seen a lot in sort of pop culture is I've seen the Pale Man like in a bunch of different memes and a bunch of things all over social media. So I was kind of expecting him to play a bigger role in the movie than
Mhm.
he did. I'm happy that he didn't because I mean it was a very effective scene and I hated it.
I love that. That scene was probably my favorite scene in the whole movie.
Uh, I well I could tell very quick. Well, and they show you very quickly that it's a Pied Piper situation of he's luring kids in and taking them, in this case eating them. But
Mhm.
I really appreciate the way that Del Toro takes these stories from European folklore, and not the most well-known ones either, like ones that have very strong roots in Celtic tradition and Germanic tradition, and bringing them to life, representing them in this story. I thought that was very neat.
Oh yeah, he is a wonderful storyteller and able to weave such interesting like folklores
Yeah,
together and he's just a wonderful director. I can't wait for his he's making a stop motion Pinocchio adaptation that's been a
really.
dream project of his for years. It's been in production hell for forever. Well, that's
Mm,
his current project he's working on. And I can't wait for that. But yeah, he's so good at and the Pan's Labyrinth in particular is just so good at treading that line of being a fun childlike adventure at times, but then also having a darker edge to it and
yeah.
dealing with very very serious issues and subjects and topics and there's some gory scenes too. Like Captain Vidal is a ruthless villain.
Oh yeah.
He's
I
absolutely ruthless.
Yeah, oof, that guy was a real piece of work. He was.
Oh yeah,
Yes, I mean,
I I love hating that villain. He is
yeah,
no redeemable qualities.
yeah. Well, and he is very much that sort of. Well, I don't want to say fascist caricature. He is, but he is a caricature of the complex fascist. Like we're getting a lot of his like, I'm a family oriented man. I'm gonna go out of my way to protect the things that I love and protect this social order that I care so passionately about. And it also shows just how corrupted those values are within him and
Yeah.
how he only really cares about his own image and his own honor, as it were.
See, that's what I love about the character is usually with a character that cruel and over the top with how cruel he is. Those characters are usually very two-dimensional.
Yeah, and he
But
is he is he is very three-dimensional.
yeah, like even with that level of cruelty and evil, does still have layers. He does
Yeah,
still have like I mean even
it
like I genuinely like when in the scene where he's torturing the soldier with a stutter. It's interesting that I genuinely like he was mocking the stutterer and being like, oh yeah, if you count to three without stuttering, I'll let you go. I weirdly genuinely believed he would have let him go,
yeah, yeah.
and
I know what you mean.
that's a hard thing to accomplish with a character like that, to genuinely believe that like because he knew in his head that he wasn't going to be able to.
Yeah,
But I genuinely think that in a weird way, with his weird, what he considers to be his moral code, he would have done that. He would have let him go if he had succeeded in that. And that's an interesting thing to pull off with such an aggressively evil character like that.
You know who he reminded me of was Ralph Fiennes' character in
Schindler's
Schindler's
List.
List.
Yeah, I agree. There are a lot of similarities there.
Yeah.
Very underrated villain. I feel like he doesn't get a lot of attention for like how well developed of a villain he is.
Oh yeah.
He's a very good cinematic villain.
Wow, they really killed that kid at the end. They really did it. Spoilers again.
Yeah, spoilers. Watch the fucking movie. It's amazing. Yeah. So okay, so there are two predominant interpretations of that ending.
I bet I can already guess what they are.
So the one is that she actually passed the test. That was the final thing,
Yeah.
and that was all real, and she, became
So
the
she
princess of
went
the underworld.
she spiritually went to the underworld.
Yes, and the other interpretation is that she just fucking did, and
Yeah.
that was her, childlike fantasy having its last, like, comforting herself in her own death of, hey, at least it wasn't for nothing.
Well, and when it showed her coming back from the underworld, that's immediately how my mind took it too. Was that, oh, it was all in her head the whole time? But then there is that ambiguity there. They never make it clear. And I also realized that very quickly, like, of course, they're never going to specify which one it was.
Mm-hmm. It can be interpreted either way very easily.
I hate, it's like Shape of Water all over again.
Both are good movies, although Pan's Labyrinth is I love Shape of Water. I know you hate it. I think Shape of Water is a very good movie. I think it deserves to win Best Picture. That said, Pan's Labyrinth is far and away a better film.
I would agree with that. And I mean, I don't hate Shape of Water. I just it wasn't my cup of tea.
Like
I have
Pan's Labyrinth is Del Toro's masterpiece.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can definitely see how this is his magnum opus.
And it's such a great blend of just so many genres and characters and themes, and I mean, not that dark fantasy has as many films as it should, but I think it's almost indisputably the best dark fantasy film.
Uh, I haven't seen enough dark fantasy films to discuss that, but
Like, I mean, and once you add in like animation, like maybe there might be some fights for it, like a Princess Mononoke is I would probably say dark fantasy, but I love Princess Mononoke, but I think Pan's Labyrinth is far and away the pinnacle of the genre. Like, we need more dark fantasy films.
yeah, I feel like dark fantasy is also a very niche genre. Like particularly, I feel like it had kind of a big bump in sort of the 80s and 90s, and it's
like, I mean, in a way, Labyrinth, the David Bowie film, is dark fantasy. I would say,
yeah,
like it's still a little more goofy, but
yeah. Well, and I mean, The Dark Crystal, that sort of
yeah.
thing.
Honestly, would you call Neverending Story dark fantasy?
It's definitely that same vibe. I've never seen Neverending Story, but it's definitely of that same sort of. It has that same aesthetic that they
Yeah, it
all
never
have.
goes as all out as like Pan's Labyrinth, but Pan's Labyrinth is also dark fantasy for adults. Like, I mean, it's
Yeah.
R-rated. It's very, very gory, very complex themes and stuff. But if we're
Oh,
kind of allowing a more family friend, like if we're considering Labyrinth and Dark Crystal to be dark fantasy, then I think Neverending Story could be
yeah,
considered dark fantasy as well.
yeah. I think it's very interesting how easy to or how effective the main character, Ophelia, was as the protagonist of an R-rated movie. Because
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's very difficult to have a child as the protagonist of a movie for adults, and it did it very well.
She was an amazing.
Oh,
That might be the best child actress performance I've ever seen.
I would definitely agree she's up there.
Like she had such a range of emotion, and her acting was phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
Um, just very believable, very charismatic, while still presenting a flawed character.
Hmm.
But like she had flaws, and she recognized them at times, and worked past them and overcome them. She had her goals. She was very, very a very strong protagonist, a very, very three-dimensional, in-depth protagonist.
Oh yeah.
And I think the actress pulled that off incredibly well. And yeah, and then the mother died.
Yeah.
I love the end, before the end, where the everyone like confronts Captain Vidal, and he's like, I know you're gonna kill me, but tell my son. And she's just like, we're not gonna tell him shit. He's not gonna know you existed.
Yeah. I really like that
And
scene.
that's the ultimate fuck
Good
you to
scene
him.
about
Like
that.
he doesn't care about death in and of itself. He cares like a
He
man.
cares about his own image, his own like
Yeah.
legacy that he's leaving. And
Yeah, like
now,
he's a man all about tradition and legacy, and
yeah,
that ends with him because of his choices.
yeah.
And I think that was a very powerful moment.
I feel like that there's got to be some sort of this is just something that's occurred to me, and something I should probably give a little more in-depth thought to. But I feel like there's got to be some sort of parallel of the or either a parallel or a juxtaposition of the Francoists sort of ideas of tradition and that the way it fuels them, and the ideas of tradition that are going into the fantasy storyline of
Hmm.
that old world story still affecting the present. I'm sure there's got to be some sort of film critic essays out there.
Oh, 100%. People much more intelligent than us, I'm sure, have dissected this film to
Certainly.
oblivion. But I mean, 100%. I would assume that's why he chose these. Like, I can't even say that either one is a framing device for the other because they are so well
Yeah.
interwoven. Neither one is really a framing device. They're both integral to the story, despite being such, on the surface level, seemingly extreme
The
differences.
the fascism is a commentary on folklore, and the folklore is a commentary on the fascism.
It's all intertwined. It's all locked in. And I love too how little fantasy elements like wove their way into the real world that affected the real world directly, like the living roots,
Mm,
and like that scene too, like where he like burns the root and it just shrieks and shrivels and
yeah.
dies, and then immediately the mother begins to. It seemed like miscarry, but then like I mean the baby
Yeah,
survived.
there were a couple of times where I thought the baby was dead.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and
but
it's but yeah, like I mean, just that was fantastic, and then like all the little touches, like the chalk that makes like the doorway,
yeah,
and, like
I
just fun little fantasy touches.
I even really enjoyed the toad scene, and that was, I mean, that only served to just be a first sort of minor obstacle, but
Mhm.
just the attention to detail, the very just the very grim-esque aesthetic of it was very neat.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Toad trial was definitely my least favorite trial, but I mean, there really
I mean,
only two full trials, right? Like Pale
yeah,
Man. I mean, the end trial was bring the baby, but yeah, the Toad trial was very interesting. It was very, and then it just fucking like explodes or whatever it was, like
yeah,
sort of the skin, like yeah, gnarly. But yeah, like all and like honestly though, going back to the ending a bit, that I'm a little more inclined to believe that the fantasy element was real and that she did like kind of ascend,
yeah,
because I feel like there are little hints throughout that like it wasn't just in her head. Like there
yeah,
were things that affected the real world, and like sure there could be coincidences, like like oh maybe she just happened to get better when she put the root under and it didn't actually do anything. Like
yeah,
sure you could write it off, but like I think that did have a real effect. And then like between the chalk doorways. Like maybe she, maybe it was in her head that she had a chalk, thing that made a doorway.
Yeah.
Maybe, in the real world, she just found a hole to crawl through. But I think
It's
there's enough
also,
hints there that correlate enough that I think it was real. I think she did ascend. I think it did have a happy ending.
if you say that it was all in her head, then you're not just, it wouldn't just be her dreaming. You are essentially trying to compensate for a large amount of delusion on her part, that she would have had to have gone out and find that baby shaped root as opposed to it just being given to her. She would have had to have gone out of her way to get into that locked room, even though she didn't know any way to get into the locked room without the use of the salt or the chalk to help her.
Yeah.
And so I definitely, I'm more inclined to believe that that was the case, that the fantastical elements were real. I also just, I mean, for my own, I want a happy ending here. I'm going to go on believing that it was real.
See, I mean, as everyone listening knows, I love me some dark and gritty, but like this is one of the few cases where I think the happier-ish ending works better. Like I think it does like fit the themes and overall tone of the movie more, because the whole entire movie has a lot of dark elements, but there's always a glimmer of hope. There's always a glimmer of light, and I think the whole tone of the film is bittersweet. So I don't think it would make sense for the ending to just be completely fuck you, none of it was real, she's just dead, and
Yeah.
blah blah blah. Like it doesn't fit tonally with the rest of the movie's themes, because as dark
Agreed.
as the movie got, there always was a bittersweet element to it. Of there always was some good. There was always something that brought hope back, even if it was in a very small, barely tangible form.
Yeah.
So, again, like as much as I love me a dark ending, I just don't think it fits. I don't think it matches the rest of the film. So and again, like I think there are so many hints that it is that the fantastical elements are real, that like yes, you could explain them away as like, oh, it's from her perspective, that's just what she sees in her head, but you have to explain them away.
Yeah.
You have to make the conscious effort to explain them away, while what the film presents you is just that these fantastical elements are part of it and they are having a real effect on the world.
Yeah.
So that's my conclusion, and I do like though that it is ambiguous enough that there is a debate about it, that there is another perspective that can be taken, even if I don't agree with it. There are, like, I can see the perspective, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a testament to how well it was crafted.
I think that sort of an ending sticks with viewers more.
Yeah, gets you talking, gets you thinking about it,
Yeah.
and it's like it's probably one of my favorite endings of a film, like because like even though I do think it was real, there is an ambiguity to it, and there is just a lasting impact of just how powerful her death is. Whether she ascended or not, that's still such a powerful thing. I mean, a child dying is a big thing in film. That rarely happens.
Yeah.
And to end with your child character, your child protagonist dying,
They
even
killed the kid, Philip.
they kill the kid, and it's so incredibly powerful, and it's such a powerful ending. Either way you perceive it, either
Yeah.
way you interpret it, it's incredibly powerful. So like I don't think either one is necessarily wrong. I'm more inclined to believe the fantastical element.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do you have any other thoughts on it?
Not really. I'm pro Pan's Labyrinth.
I absolutely same. It is almost definitely in my top 5 films ever made. I think it's about a damn near perfect movie. I can't think of a single flaw with it. It is, the cinematography is amazing, the story, the themes, the fantastical elements, the acting, the just God, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful film, and I think it's just it's a testament to just how creative and powerful of a storyteller Del Toro is, because Del Toro is a very he has a huge range in his storytelling. This is the same man who did Hellboy and Pacific Rim. And I love both of those movies, but they are very, very tonally different.
Oh yeah.
Like you have Hellboy and Pacific Rim, fun, gritty but fun monster romps. And then you have, Shape of Water, which is a weird dark fantasy love story. And then you have Pan's Labyrinth, which is, a very character study of a child protagonist, dark fantasy. And it's just, he has such a range in his storytelling and directing, and absolutely phenomenal director. One of the best working directors we have today. I'm glad in the past few years, whether you like Shape of Water or not, I'm glad Shape of Water kind of brought him into a more prominent, he was known more prominently for mainstream audiences, and I'm glad that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely love that very shaggy bearded man.
Yeah.
Pro Pan's Labyrinth. If you have not seen it, what the fuck? You just got the entire movie spoiled for you. What are you doing? And absolutely go watch it. It is one of the greatest films ever made. All right, so
All right.
What's your surprise mystery subject for the week? If it's labor unions again, I swear to God.
Labor? Okay, well, actually, I was gonna do something in that same vein.
Oh my God.
I decided it wasn't. It was I can't do too many heavy stuff in one short period of time. So instead, I'm gonna make you watch something else.
Give us something that'll get us some views, man. Like Andy Samberg.
All right, kiddo.
Interesting.
All right, so what Philip just watched was a work of art, the music video to Tiffany's I Think We're Alone Now. It is a pretty well-known music video, as well as music videos with cultural impact. And there's just a lot to unpack there. So Philip, what were your thoughts?
It was the song and the music video. I've heard the song before. Definitely, I haven't seen the music video. Didn't realize apparently this was a cover of a song from like the '60s, which I was unaware of. But yeah, no, it was something. She danced a lot, and the whole video, like I guess that maybe
it's
that was
just
like the
her
thing
going to malls.
It's her going to malls, and like literally the entire video, it's her going to malls, and then like fucking with her hair, just going. It's like she was in a wind turbine. Like, I think we're alone now. Oh my God, my hair! Like she doesn't stop fucking with her hair the entire thing.
The thing that I can never get over with this music video, as many times as I watch it, is just how much of a microcosm of the 80s it is. Like it is so. The entire music video is just like her singing to audiences in shopping malls in Utah. Like she went to a bunch of shopping malls and just and that was. It has nothing to do with the lyrics. It has nothing to do with the music. She's never alone with anyone in the entire music video, unless it's her alone, like posing in front of some sign or whatever.
See, Seth, I think you're missing the subtlety that she was going for. I think you are missing what she was going for. Was that even among crowds of people in shopping malls, some of the busiest places in America, sometimes you still feel alone in the world, no matter how surrounded by people you are. Even when you're trying to act happy and fucking with your hair and spasming out in the sides of outside of shopping malls, you feel alone.
Yeah.
And there's a sorrow there, a deep sorrow, just dripping from this what seems to be a very shallow poppy cover of a song. There's something deep here, Seth. A deep loneliness that Tiffany is trying to convey.
That was beautiful, Philip. I didn't know you had attuned so effectively to the song. It really spoke to you clearly here.
Oh yeah, no, I mean Tiffany. We're linked, man. I know what she was trying to do.
Okay, so I think that had to. That's the only song that I know from Tiffany. I would consider her a one-hit wonder. Maybe she wasn't. I wouldn't know. I wasn't alive in the 80s. But honestly, because of that song, I still want to go to a Tiffany concert one day. Like that is actually a life goal of mine, is to
I mean,
attend.
I think that's there's a lot of one hit wonders. I only know one song by them, but like I still want to go see them.
Yeah.
Like I saw Smash Mouth live.
Franz
I got
Ferdinand?
I also saw Franz Ferdinand live for part of it, and I will never forgive myself for
I'm
leaving their
so
show
sorry,
early.
Smash Mouth and Franz Ferdinand.
Yeah, well, Smash Mouth wasn't my fault. Smash Mouth, the audience was just assholes. Literally, it was a 30-minute set at a show in Disney World, Epcot, and it was 30-minute set, and you had assholes like 5 minutes into the set screaming, "We're play All Stars!" Like, fuck off! You can wait 25 minutes. Like, let them play their other 4 songs. Like, come on. Like what a dickhead audience.
I don't really know how to describe just how strong of an attachment I have to this music video. Because well I think a lot of it comes down to my relationship with my my one of my roommates from a few years back, our mutual friend Noah. And there was this one point in school year where I was listening to like this classic rock, classic pop station. That was all I was listening to. And for whatever reason, I think We're Alone Now was in constant circulation. And Noah, on the other hand, had started watching The Umbrella Academy, of which the song is featured very prominently in the pilot episode of The Umbrella Academy. I had not watched it yet, but because of that, it had been stuck in his head, and he was humming it one day, and I was like, I was just listening to that song. That's so weird. And so I started playing it on the speakers, and then that just became a running gag for the rest of the year. One of us would randomly throw up, I think We're Alone Now, and just jump and dance around the house. And so, I mean, there's a very sort of fond feeling of nostalgia that's associated with it. It's just so fun, you know? Tiffany's so fun. I want one of those Tiffany posters.
The ones that they randomly just throw down in the fucking shopping mall.
Those
And just
ones.
unravel. Yeah. Yeah, it's a pop song from the 80s.
Well, did you watch How I Met Your Mother?
Yeah.
Definitely some strong influence on Robin Sparkles.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, yeah, I see Robin Sparkles vibes for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, weirdly, so apparently she was like 15 when she made that song. So like
Really?
I get like Friday vibes almost. This is the original Friday.
That's disconcerting to think about.
Yeah.
One day we'll review Friday, and hopefully we will be a lot nicer than I was talking about it when I was 13 years old.
Yeah. I mean, Friday is not a good song by any means,
No.
but like the fact that she got death threats and shit, like fuck off.
People were terrible to her. That was
like, it was a bad song. I think it's one thing to make fun of her, like because it's a bad song. It was stupid, but like she got fucking harassment and death threats, and she was like 14.
Well, I
like,
mean,
fuck off.
there is a line on how much criticism you should give any artist, but particularly the fact that such ugliness was being directed towards a 13-year-old was not a high point in our culture.
Yeah, the fact that literally 40, 50-year-old men internet harassing a 13-year-old, like fuck you. Like you're a cockbag. A whole bag of them.
A whole bag of them. I mean, that's pretty apt description.
Yeah, it's just like don't. It's not that hard to not be a dickhead.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. So many people fail at it.
That seems to be a running theme in human history.
Like all you had to do
not
was not be a dickhead.
not paying heed to how easy it would be to not be a dickhead.
Like literally, like I have my asshole moments, but like I feel like typically on a day-by-day basis, I'm not a dickhead. You just how I do that? By not being a dickhead. Boom, bing, bang, boom. It's just that simple.
Boom, it's
one easy step to not being a dickhead is don't be a dickhead. Can we make that a shirt? Don't be a dickhead.
Don't be a dickhead. Hey, yeah.
Like Jesus Christ. What about have you heard the Weird Al parody of I Think We're Alone Now?
No, I have not. What is
it's called, it? I Think I'm a Clone Now.
Huh. Is it Star Wars related or?
So I don't think his version was, or like the song itself, his parody itself, I don't think is. But I remember seeing like the video that blew up of that parody was set to like Star Wars clone stuff. So a fan video of that parody got really, really big. Like I don't know if Weird Al made a video of that one. I think that was just a one-off track on one of his albums. I don't think he made a video of it. So yes and no. It's associated with Star Wars stuff at this point, but in and of itself, I don't think that was like his intention at the time, which is kind of funny given that, he has a billion Star Wars songs. I say a billion, I think he's like 2, but
yeah, let's see. The Saga Begins and
Saga Begins and Yoda.
Yeah. Oh gosh, love both of those.
Saga Begins is a classic.
I think I heard both of those songs before I heard either of the songs they parodied.
Oh, I mean, that was my experience with Weird Al. Was like I pretty much only listened when I was growing up. I listened to Christian music, country music, and Weird Al.
I legitimately did not learn that. I thought White and Nerdy was an original composition. I did not realize that it was a spoof on Ridin' Dirty and that there was a song called Ridin' Dirty until I was in college.
That's how I was. I think I had a similar interaction with White and Nerdy, and then the same with Amish Paradise. I did not realize was based on Gangster's Paradise until much later. I mean, in a weird way, like Weird Al introduced me to like so much music that I ended up appreciating so much more, and he was weirdly my gateway to because like I said, like my musical, what I listened to when I was a kid was very limited to like Christian and country music just based on my upbringing and background. And Weird Al was weirdly a gateway to so many other styles
into pop culture.
Yeah, because I started listening to rap because I looked up like Ridin' Dirty and Gangster's Paradise, and then I from there got more into the rap genre. I mean, my first exposure to grunge would have been when I was like 12, hearing Smells Like Nirvana.
Oh my gosh,
that was my first experience with Nirvana and grunge was Weird Al.
Look out for our Weird Al episode coming in a few weeks.
If we get it on the randomizer, I would love to talk about Weird Al more in depth.
I just checked to make sure it was on the list.
Good. If not, we're gonna add it before we roll the dice. So Tiffany exists and made a song, and I'm good for her.
Yeah, I'm
catchy.
I'm pro the I Think We're Alone Now music video.
The music video just does nothing for me. It's just this chick fucking with her hair around the shopping mall for 4 minutes.
That's culture, so I guess
I am uncultured.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fine song. It's just a kind of generic pop song to me. Like it's fine. It's catchy, but whatever. It's fine. I guess I'm neutral. I'm neutral. I think we're alone now.
Purpose is plays, Philip, and it achieves that purpose.
Purpose is highlighting the existential loneliness we all suffer on a daily basis.
That too.
She was ahead of her time, that Tiffany, a real philosopher.
Oh yeah.
All right, I think that's any other closing thoughts on Tiffany?
Nope. That's all I got.
Would you have breakfast at Tiffany's?
I would. I do love breakfast at Tiffany's. Both the song and the movie.
The movie's a little racist, but
Oh, extremely racist. That is not. that is a very big hint to it.
Yeah, because that's the thing that gets me about that movie too, and Mickey Rourke's very racist character
Yeah.
is that like he didn't need to be in the movie.
Yeah. No,
You
it
cut that character.
served
He literally
no
has nothing to do
purpose
with the
to the
plot.
movie at all, except to make people not want to watch it 50 years later.
Yeah, like he's I guess supposed to be the comic relief character, but it's just racist humor and
Well, and it's not even really funny. It's just racism. It's
yeah,
just
it's not there's no joke there. The joke
yeah,
is aha, he's an Asian even though he's not because he's a white man and yellow face.
yeah.
It's
It
oof.
it is a awful caricature of an Asian man.
Yeah, and it has like because the movie it's a good movie.
Yeah,
You just have that big old blemish on it.
yeah.
And like literally you could I'm sure someone has made a cut, like a fan cut to get rid of it. And like I'm sure nothing was lost from the plot.
Yeah.
But there's a song called Breakfast with Tiffany too. Yeah, I forgot about the song. It's a decent song.
No. And I said, what about Breakfast at Tiffany's?
But yeah, so yeah, Tiffany exists. She's 48 now, apparently, according to Wikipedia.
I honestly, I'm surprised she's still that young.
I mean, if she was like 15 when she made the song in the 80s,
Yeah, good point.
I think we're alone now.
Are we, Philip?
Oh, what can we do now that we're alone?
I could think of one or two things.
Yes, water
Who's
polo.
the randomizer? Oh, we went in two very different directions there. Those are the two things we're doing: water polo, and then we're gonna use the randomizer.
Yeah, so listen now as we splish splash around and play some water polo, and then use the randomizer. All right, Seth. Let's pull up that randomizer. Let's see what we got next week. First, we got to remove hometowns. All right, so yeah, these are my random noises. Shit.
That's you splish splashing.
Splish splash water polo. All right, so for next week's first topic, we will be talking about fruit.
What fruit?
Fruit.
Okay, fruit.
And our media topic for next week is going to be, drum roll please. It's a long drum roll. I got to copy paste. All right, so next week's topic is sorry to bother you.
We're watching The Martian? No.
We're watching The Martian? Gone with the Martian?
Gone with the Martian.
All right, so next week, sorry to bother you. That's a very interesting movie. You've not seen it before, correct, Seth?
I have not.
Don't look anything up prior to watching it.
Okay.
Do you know anything about it? Have you?
I know it's about racism, and I know it's got one of the guys from Atlanta.
Correct. That's all you know?
That's all I know.
Good. Keep it that way.
Okay.
Tune in next week for fruit, sorry to bother you, and random mystery subject that Seth will be picking again to balance out the order of the world. And yeah, it'll be a wild episode because Sorry to Bother You is a wild movie. I'm excited to rewatch it.
Okay.
You don't sound excited.
I mean you're just I'm excited to watch it. I've been wanting to watch it for a while, but you're building it up here.
It's wild.
Okay.
It's wild.
Mm-hmm.
Wild Wild West. That's the best. I'm Jim West. When are we reviewing Wild Wild West?
What do you mean by that?
The movie Wild Wild West starring Will Smith.
I did not know that was a movie.
How? It's like one of the worst movies ever.
Well, I'm not cultured for once.
Will Smith turned down to being Neo from The Matrix to be in Wild Wild West.
Really?
Yes.
That is incredibly disappointing.
But yeah, tune in next week for Sorry to Bother You, Fruit, and Random Mystery Thing. Thank you guys for listening. Let us know what you guys think of the randomization thing of the, random wheel of topics. It's a fun thing we've been trying, let us know what you guys think about it. And yeah, tune in next week for some more wacky adventures. We're working on some other projects to try and bring to you all. Hopefully within the next month or two, we'll have some new content. Trying some things out. So stick around.
Add a little variety to the pot.
Yeah, doing some art shit. All right, love you all. Thanks for listening. Appreciate it. Peace out.
See y'all next week.